Have you ever noticed how native British English speakers keep adding in little words like well, you know, so, or even like again and again in conversation? The problem is, these words are everywhere in spoken English, but they rarely get taught and they rarely appear in textbooks. So even if your grammar is perfect, without them, your English can sound a bit too formal, robotic, or even unnatural. So, what's the solution? Well, in this lesson, we're going to learn what these English filler words are, why native speakers use them, and how you can add them to your own conversations. Mastering fillers will help you sound natural, more fluent, and connect with people the way Brits really do in everyday life. And by the end of this lesson, you'll know how to sound fluent and authentic in British English, just like a native English speaker. And remember, if you do want to learn even more about this lesson, there is a free PDF that you can find in the description. Hello, you wonderful people. Welcome to English Right Now. My name is Roy, your British English teacher, and I've been a teacher of English for nearly 15 years, and I've helped thousands of students just like you on their journey towards mastering things like filler words, understanding British culture, learning British English, and of course, mastering a modern British RP accent. But in this lesson, we're talking about how to sound more fluent with British filler words. Now, before we dive into the list, let's answer a really important question. Why bother learning filler words at all? A lot of English learners are taught that fillers are kind of lazy speech and something that you should avoid, but in reality, they're used all the time. They are essential for sounding natural in real conversations. Notice that I say real conversations because they help you sound less robotic. They help you sound less formal. These words are so natural, it would be difficult to find a native speaker who doesn't use them. Probably the most important thing is to know when and how to use these filler words. So, casual settings, if you're down the pub, if you're meeting friends, maybe you're going for dinner with some friends, and even with your colleagues at work, why would you not use these typical discourse markers? However, if you're in more formal settings, maybe a formal party, a high-stakes board meeting, you're meeting the CEO of the company or giving a presentation to senior management, then you might want to avoid using ums and ers and you knows. But there are 5 real benefits to using filler words in English. First of all, they buy you thinking time. Native speakers don't talk in perfect sentences. They use fillers like well, or you know, to pause without leaving an awkward silence. If you want time to think in English, fillers are your best friend. So, I think it's round the corner. It's better than freezing up and going completely silent. Number 2, they soften your speech. British culture values politeness and indirectness. We've talked about it a lot on this channel. And fillers let you disagree or hesitate without sounding rude. Well, I'm not completely sure about that. Instead of a blunt, you're wrong. A tiny word like well can transform the tone of your whole sentence. Number 3 is they show that you're listening. Active listening fillers like yeah, right, or exactly signal engagement without interrupting. In Britain, it's polite to let somebody finish. We don't need to talk over each other. And fillers help you stay part of the conversation. Number 4, they build cultural identity. Some fillers mark where you're from or who you hang out with. So, for example, a Londoner might more commonly say bruv or innit, more so than some other parts of the country. And using fillers correctly doesn't just make you fluent, it makes you sound like you belong. And also, number 5, it makes you sound more authentic. So even if your grammar and vocabulary are perfect, if you never use fillers, you can just sound too formal, like a textbook, not a person. So, for example, if you say, I do not agree with that, it sounds very robotic. But instead, if you say, well, I'm not sure, you know, the second one sounds warmer, more approachable, and more British. But now let's get onto the list of fillers. And first of all, we'll talk about everyday fillers. These are for politeness and softening. These are words that you're going to hear all the time. The first one is well. Well softens a disagreement, often with the tone of voice like, well, and it can also be used to buy time. So instead of saying that's wrong, you might say something like, well, I'm not completely sure that's true. Well shows thoughtfulness and avoids being too blunt or direct. Number 2, you know. You know is a shortened form of you know what I mean. It's quite a cliched example, but British footballers, particularly the English footballers, are famous for saying, you know what I mean, during interviews. So something like, I've scored a goal, you know what I mean? Yeah, I do. But you know is used to kind of keep the conversation quite cooperative and inclusive. So I could say it was a bit awkward, but it was a bit, awkward. It's inviting you to share the same opinion. While you know can be used to check for agreement, to see if somebody agrees with us, we often use to buy some time to allow us to think a little bit more. So you could say something like, he was shouting at everybody. Number 3, right. Now, right has a lot of different uses in British English. It can be used to signal acceptance, right? Comprehension when we understand a situation. But we also use it as a filler to signal a transition. It's quite a polite signal that we are changing from one activity to another. We commonly use it when we're leaving. Something like, right, should we go? Right, should we talk about food? Right, should we have dinner? These kind of things. It signals a transition, and it's often used to introduce a new idea. As a side note, we often use right as a kind of question tag. So instead of saying, you work there, don't you? We might say, you work there, right? The 4th filler word that you might want to add to your English is actually. This is a polite correction. Actually, I think the meeting's tomorrow, not today. Often softens a contradiction. What's really interesting about the word actually is we sometimes just use it to reinforce our opinion, even when nothing is contradicting us. So I watched that new film. I actually really liked it. It shows a bit of surprise there. There is no contradiction, but we're just adding it to really validate our opinion. Number 5, I suppose. This is kind of showing a tentative agreement. I just used kind of there. That's an important one that's coming. So we could try it your way, but saying, yes, I suppose we could try it your way. This shows flexibility while avoiding strong commitment. I want to go to that new restaurant. Yeah, I suppose we could try it. Number 6, mind you. This adds a contrasting point. It's a lovely place. Mind you, it's not cheap. So this is a very British softener that adds that kind of extra information that contrasts something you've previously said. We often use the words if you like as a filler in a polite suggestion. So we could go there instead, if you like. It's kind of leaving the decision a bit open, and it's avoiding pressure. Many of you that have watched this channel will know that we like to avoid putting pressure on people in British culture, particularly related to negative politeness. So these words, if you like, is inviting a continuation of discussion. We also use it when we don't necessarily agree with what the person said, and we're just leaving them to make their own decisions and choices. So, for example, I don't really think so, but you can go that way if you like. Number 8, sort of. This makes statements less direct. So instead of saying, he was annoyed, you could say, yeah, he was sort of annoyed, but not angry. So sort of just makes it a little bit weaker and less direct. Again, in British culture, we do like to avoid being too direct quite commonly. I've done lessons about when we do become direct. You can check those out in the link in the description. Another alternative to sort of is kind of. Again, this makes statements less direct. He was kind of annoyed, but not really angry. We use fair enough for polite acceptance. Oh, you don't feel like going? Fair enough. It's a gentle way of showing understanding without argument. We also do kind of use it when we accept there is no point continuing with the conversation. You want to do that? Okay, fair enough. Okay can be used in a very similar way to the word right. It can be used to start a sentence. For example, okay, do you understand me? It can be used to change topics. For example, okay, let's talk about that another day. Or, okay, what should we have for dinner? Or it can even be used to get agreement. Let's have something to eat, okay? All right is an informal spelling of the words all right. And in a similar way to right, people use it to agree. So, for example, all right, let's do that. And we also use it to move between different ideas. All right, let's talk about something else. And of course, we also use it to mean safe or well. Are you all right? Just has a lot of different meanings in English. It can mean recently. Oh, I was just speaking to him. Or it can mean only. I want just these, or just these, please. And it can also mean exactly. Oh, that is just right. But just gets used a lot, even when it's not necessarily needed. You could say, I was thinking about eating, but quite a few British English speakers will say, I was just thinking about eating, even if it isn't that recent. It kind of adds a bit of breathing room, and it gives a little sense of immediacy as well. And finally, in everyday fillers, we have to be honest. To be honest is something that we say to validate our own opinion and make sure that you really kind of understand that we are being serious. To be honest, I don't really want to go, but I will if you want to. Or, to be honest, I thought it was a really good film. Now let's move on to another section of conversational linkers. And these are used to help with flow and coherence. And number one is so. So has got quite a few different meanings. It can mark a conclusion of a point. So that's why I changed jobs. Or it can also be used to mark a continuation. So let's talk about this. So let's do this. It's commonly used to keep the conversation moving forward. So number two, notice I just said so there. Yes, I did it intentionally, but I could have done it naturally. Number two would be now. Now is also a great way to start a conversation or start making a point. Now, one thing I want to do, this word could be completely omitted from any of those examples and they will still sound the same or they will still mean the same. But now gives it that sense of urgency that British speakers commonly like to add. Now, number three, did it again, is anyway. Anyway redirects or resumes the topic. Anyway, as I was saying, it's a polite way to bring the focus back on something we were saying. We sometimes use it to introduce a concession. So, for example, the film was awful. Anyway, it was cheap, so it's not that much of a problem. Number four is I mean. This clarifies or rephrases something. It was fun. I mean, exhausting, but fun. I mean doesn't really add that much here because it still works without those words. It was fun, exhausting, but fun. A good pause there will really help that. But I mean shows that clarification of your own point. Basically is one that I use a lot and it simplifies an idea. Basically, we just need to sign the form. You don't really need basically in that sentence, but it shows that we are simplifying an idea and making a complex thing sound simple. After all, are two words we use to add justification, and it strengthens your reasoning quite gently. We should invite him. After all, he's helped us a lot. It adds that justification for the first part of a sentence. Like most of these words, as I say, don't really need to be used for the sentence to still make sense, but this is the point of filler words. They just make you sound a little bit more natural and potentially buy you a bit of time. At the end of the day, summarizes a key point. At the end of the day, family comes first, and I want to spend more time with my family. This is common in spoken debates and when we're giving opinions. The thing is something we say to introduce a difficulty, and it prepares the listener for a problem. You could say, we don't have enough time, but the thing is, we don't have enough time. By the way is something we can say to add extra information, although there is something else I need to say about that. So I could say, by the way, did you hear about Anna's new job? It smoothly shifts the topic to a side topic. Culturally, we commonly use by the way to also introduce the main point that we were going to mention in the first place. So we might say, how's your mum? How's your dad? How's your brother? How's your job? Oh, by the way, you still owe me £10. And finally, in this section, like I said, is a way of saying, I kind of told you so, or that's something I've already said, or to kind of reintroduce a point that you've already made that you felt wasn't listened to. Like I said, I'm going on holiday. And on that topic, let's move on to part 3, which is agreement and listening fillers. This is for active listening, when we want to show that we're really paying attention. Number 1 is yeah, an informal version of yes, and it's used often as neutral confirmation. So somebody may say, oh, it's been really busy, and I might say, yeah. It keeps the conversation flowing. And I will say at this point, we often use multiple examples of these words in one sentence. So if somebody says, Roy, you don't like that film, I might say, yeah, no. So to be honest, it's not really my thing. Number 2 is exactly. This shows strong alignment. Exactly. That's it. and it shows genuine agreement. Maybe I completely agree with your point. I could say, oh, that's it, but exactly really strengthens that. Number 3, This is kind of emphatic agreement, and it's the first example of a noise rather than a word. So, is kind of a 2-syllable sound. This shows that I completely agree with what you're saying. Exactly. Yeah. Is another way of saying I understand. So, for example, this is a microphone. It shows a level of understanding. It's a noise that we make to show understanding. Oh is something we say when we're surprised. Oh, really? Or even shocked. Oh, really? But we commonly use oh to show that something we're saying has just come to mind, that it is a very recent thought. Oh, have you heard there's a new restaurant? We even say oh when it's not necessarily a very recent thought. It might be the one thing I wanted to talk about, but it kind of shows that it wasn't a planned conversation. Oh, I meant to say that we also use oh to highlight that we aren't aware of the full situation. Oh, I didn't realise. But oh is something we quite commonly use with other fillers, and it maybe buys us a little bit of extra time. Oh yeah, I was going to say, of course confirms politely. Yeah, of course. Sometimes we just reduce it down to course, like, will you help me? Yeah, of course. It's often used in service and polite interactions. It's probably slightly more formal to use the 2 words, of course, but a lot of people just reduce it down to 1. Yeah, of course I'll help you with that. Definitely. This sort of shows how certain we are about something, and it really can strengthen an endorsement. I could say I'd recommend that restaurant, but I definitely recommend that restaurant. This gives it a real strength, but again, doesn't really add that much in terms of the meaning of the sentence. True is often used as a brief acknowledgement. That's true. Hadn't really thought of that. It sounds thoughtful and reflective. Yeah, true. Right can also be used to show that we understand something. So I can say, I've got you, which is an informal way of saying, I understand, but right, got you. This is kind of a combination that just really shows we understand what that person is saying. Sure can also be used in a similar way to right, to mean that I understand, and it really strengthens that understanding. So you could say, I see, but sure, I see. Or when somebody says something, do you understand? Sure. And finally, for this section is, I know, right? This shows shared agreement with enthusiasm. That was hilarious. I know, right? It's informal and it shows real excitement. But now let's move on to more slang and informal fillers. So first up, we have mate. Mate is an anchor of informal speech. So you could say, all right, how's it going? But adding the word mate just makes it a bit friendlier, even if they're not your friend. We often use this word to build rapport. All right, mate, can I get a return to Oxford Street, please? In it is a casual tag for emphasis. So, for example, it's cold today, innit? And it's inviting a conversation. It's opening up the conversation. In it would be a kind of slang version of isn't it? Really is just a reduced form of isn't it? But it's used a lot. Cold day, isn't it? It's good, innit? You will hear some people say, nah, yeah. It sounds like a complete contradiction. But if somebody says, no, yeah, the word that you're really listening for in these two is the second word, and it signals an informal agreement. Do you like it? Nah, yeah, it was all right. The opposite to nah, yeah is yeah, nah. This is for gentle disagreement. So again, the second word is the important one. Nah is like a kind of slang version of no. Do you want to go out? Yeah, nah, I'm too tired, mate. It softens a refusal. Whatever can be seen as quite dismissive. So if I say, oh, do what you want, whatever, this is quite casual and it can seem a bit rude depending on the tone of voice you use. If I make it a bit more upbeat, yeah, whatever, it sort of more invites that I'm not really fussed, I've got no real opinion on something, let's do what you want to do. Literally is an overused emphasizer to the point where it doesn't really mean anything. I was dying of laughter works, but I was literally dying of laughter. British people commonly use this for exaggeration in casual speech. I've made a whole video about this word because it really is losing its meaning in so many ways. Proper is also an informal intensifier. So instead of that was a good meal, you could say that was a proper good meal. This is really informal and it's quite common in certain regions. Like is more common with younger British speakers, but it can be used in many different ways. For example, to add emphasis. So it's like not a massive problem. Or it can also be used when we're quoting a conversation, even quoting something that we previously said. So when I spoke to him, I was like, no way that's happening. So now let's move on to fillers that can help you gain some thinking time. And these can be used for hesitation or even modesty. So first up, we have, this is another sound. And this is basically a sound of hesitation. It shows thought and avoids rushing. So instead of saying, I don't know where it is, you could say, I think it's over there. It's like a sound that shows we are thinking. So this one is a key sound to show that you're engaged and you are considering the words you're using. Is another typically British sound, and this one is also similar in terms of hesitation, but it sort of shows a uncertainty, but it shows it in a polite way. Maybe we should try again later. If you want to make an opinion more tentative, you could use the words, I guess. This avoids sounding too forceful. So instead of saying, we could ask her, you could say, yeah, I guess we could ask her. Again, a lot of these words come down to tone, particularly when showing hesitation. Maybe suggests possibility, and it keeps the tone soft and quite indirect. Maybe we should wait until tomorrow. Probably is a word that we throw in a lot to hedge the certainty. Maybe we absolutely 100% know what we're talking about, but we're trying to show a bit of modesty in making a prediction. Instead of saying he'll be late, as always, you could say, probably he'll be late. We use I think in a similar way to I guess to soften an opinion. I think this one looks better. It makes the opinion sound less pushy than this one looks better. Not sure protects face when we're either unsure or we don't want to sound too bossy. It's kind of a modest uncertainty. I'm not sure that's the best idea though. We use could be for tentative agreement. Could be he just forgot. It avoids full commitment to what we say. I suppose so is used for lukewarm agreement. It's when we're neither enthusiastic nor completely rejecting the idea. Do you like it? Yeah, I suppose so. And finally, I wonder. This shows soft reflection. I wonder if they'll actually show up. It invites thought without pressure. So those are some classic British fillers that you can use. You can add to your spoken informal English to help you sound much more natural. But there is one more thing we need to talk about. It's something we can't ignore. It is the power of silence. In British culture, a pause in conversation isn't always awkward. It can be completely meaningful. A short pause before answering shows that you're thinking carefully, you're being polite, and not rushing into a direct or blunt reply. Imagine if somebody asks you, do you like my cooking? If you say instantly, no, it sounds really rude. But if you pause, so for example, do you like my cooking? Well, it's different. That little silence softens the impact and makes it sound more thoughtful. Pauses also give rhythm to British conversation. They create space for humour, understatement, or even irony. Sometimes, what isn't said carries as much weight as what is. So in a way, pauses are the invisible filler words of British English. They're not taught in textbooks, but they are part of sounding truly natural. And in fact, I'm planning a whole video on the art of the pause in British English, how silence, timing, and delivery completely change the meaning of what you say. So if you don't want to miss that, make sure you're subscribed. If you want to learn even more about today's lesson, there is a free PDF you can download in the description. Just click on the link and you can get it. So, click on the link. But for me today, it just leaves me to say thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.